what he did. We had a thing that we passed a while ago, actually, in the Clinton administration, which I thought was a little ill-advised, and it was called the Iraqi Liberation Act. And it said in it, it listed all the bad things about Saddam Hussein. But it explicitly said, he's just a bad guy. It didn't say go to war. Well, along came Cheney and Bush, and what'd they say? The Democrats said this guy's a bad guy. We got to take him out. We have to have regime change. Remember the first time we started hearing the word regime change? And then we also said, okay, Mr. President, in order to avoid war, we're going to give you power to go to the United Nations to keep... Yes, sir. The President does it all the time. Every time I Anyway, so look, what did he do? We had this thing called the Use of Force Act. Everybody now says all the Democrats voted to let this guy to say go attack Saddam Hussein and invade Iran. Well, if you read the resolution, it doesn't say that at all. Everybody's very much in vogue. All these newspapers saying, well, how did you guys give him the authority? You wanted to go to war. No. Read all the speeches and everything was said at the time. It said, hey, Mr. President, we're going to give you the authority to go into the United Nations in a united front and going to be able to say, look, you better keep the sanctions on this guy. We better bring the inspectors back in, because if you don't, we may have to do something. It was to give him the authority to whip the French and others into shape to keep the sanctions on Saddam. Because remember what the debate was back then 5 years ago. The debate was lift the arms embargo against Saddam. Why? Remember all our liberal friends, and I count myself among them, were saying things like, look, we're killing Iraqi children. There's not enough money. There's not enough medicine. Their hospitals aren't being shut. We got to lift the embargo. Lift it because we're only hurting the people. We're not hurting him. And most of us said, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't want to lift that embargo. You give this guy an extra $3 billion a year to spend. He's going to go over the next 5 to 10 years and buy a nuclear weapon. He ain't going to build one. He's going to buy one. He's going to find a loose nuke somewhere. So we got to keep the sanctions on him. That was the context. So what did Bush do? Bush came along and he took the Iraqi Liberation Act, which just cataloged all the bad things about Saddam, which were true. He wasn't a good guy. And then he took that, and then he took the Use of Force Act, which was supposed to get inspectors back in to Iraq, and he said, these are the two justifications for me to go to war. And bang, he went to war. Now, what makes Democrats think you're going to turn around and say, okay, we're going to tell you all the bad things about Iran. We're going to formally declare the Iranian army a terrorist organization. But, Mr. President, we're just telling you that. We don't want you to do anything about it. What do you think he's going to do with that information? What do you think he's going to do? He's going to turn, mark my words. Mark my words. He's going to turn and say, the Democrats overwhelmingly said to me, these guys are terrorists. What do you want me to do, folks? They're terrorists. They're there. I can do something about them. And you're telling me I shouldn't? No. I'm going to, just like the Iraqi Liberation Act. That's my concern. That's my concern. When Clinton was president, the Iraqi Liberation Act was a statement of our outrage about what Saddam was doing. It wasn't a declaration of war. If Clinton or Biden were president today saying this force are bad guys and they're doing these things, you'd be safe. Because I'm not going to use that as an excuse to invade a country of 72 million people. Am I making any sense? Not do you agree with me? Do you at least understand what I'm saying? So we got this big fight going on now inside the party. And it gets down to a simple proposition. Not whether or not the accusations made about the Quds Force are true or not, they're true. But whether or not the Democrats are going to be foolish enough to trust this guy not to abuse whatever we give him in terms of power. He will abuse it. Mark my words. And folks, find a single solitary military person you know. And some of you are retired military. Find any publication you can find, left, right, or center, who will tell you that we have the capacity now to invade Iran, bring that government down, and occupy it till there's a good government there. That sound kind of familiar? You know what I mean? And so here gets me to the point I'm going to stop, because I had planned on talking about other things to you, except, like I said, this is the top of the news right now. Two things. If you want to deal with Iran or anything else in the world, there's a great big boulder sitting in the middle of the road preventing you from doing it. It's called the Iraq War. It's like a boulder right in the middle of the intersection. Until we find a rational way to end that war without chaos ensuing and having a regional war, until we get our forces out of there, we have no credibility anywhere in the world to get the rest of the world to follow us. And folks, remember back, a couple of you guys are my age, remember back in the Vietnam era? Remember a guy named William Fulbright, who had the job I now have as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee? He wrote a book called The Arrogance of Power, a little skinny little book. And he basically said, we can't be the only policeman in the whole world. We can't solve every single problem in the world militarily. Well, folks, until we deal with Iraq, there's only 12 combat divisions, fancy term I know, but the guys that go and shoot. There's only 12 of them. 10 of them are either coming or going from Iraq right now. Number one. Number two, everybody in the world looks at our policies as, my God, what are we doing? Even our closest friend, the Brits, are now down to having 2,000 people in Iraq. And if they can get them all out, they'll get them all out. We are we are tilting against windmills here in terms of the world's public opinion of us. You know, there's an old bad joke. Some of you, probably with disappointment last night, watched the Boston-Cleveland game. Well, you know, if you're baseball fans, there's an old joke. I used to play baseball in high school when I went to college, and I had a coach. It turned out the story he told originally was Leo DeRoche's. He never told me that. I thought it was his original. And he said that there was a particular game we were playing. I was a freshman. I was a center fielder. We had a star center fielder who was a senior, and he made a couple errors in the first inning. He never made errors. And the coach turned and said, "Did you ever hear the story? I'm changing the name about George, the star center fielder." I said, "No, coach." Actually, he said Leroy, but I said George. And I said, "No, coach." He said, "Well," he said, "George is a star center fielder. In the first 2 innings, he made 5 errors, so the coach took him out." And he turned around and he said, "John, you're in center field." John goes out to center field, play resumes, routine fly ball hits John's glove and he drops it as an error. Coach goes nuts, calls timeout, and it's, "John, get in here." There's John jogging across the field, across the third base line. The coach reaches and grabs John by the numbers and says, "John, what's the matter with you?" And John looks at the coach and says, "Coach, George screwed up center field so badly, no one can play." Well, I know it's a joke, but let me tell you guys, I promise, I know almost every one of these world leaders, not because I'm important. I've been doing this for 34 years since I've been a kid, since I've been 29 years old. I know them. I came up with them. They were young parliamentarians when I was a young kid in the Senate. I literally know them. They think George has screwed up center field so badly, they don't want to play with it. They don't want to get involved with it. Really and truly. So you got to end this war in Iraq. Number one. Number two, in order to do that, the reason to do that is not just to save the lives that are unnecessarily being lost for young Americans over there, but secondly, so we can then regain our ability to lead the rest of the world. What we should be doing with Iraq is keeping the international community together to put tighter and tighter and tighter sanctions on Iran that already has real problems. Iran imports 60% of all their oil. All their gasoline. They cannot turn the lights on in Tehran without importing refined oil. They don't have refineries. Most people don't know. Second largest reserves in the world, and they import more than half of the refined oil. Secondly, our intelligence agencies point out that, in fact, they're in a position whereby, if they don't change the way they operate their oil fields, they will be importing crude oil by the year 2012 to 2014. It's not like these guys are 300-pound giants here.